And welcome once again to EWTN's Bookmark. Our guest is the very familiar host here on EWTN, Father Mitch Pacwa, S.J., and this is the Holy Land and Armchair Pilgrimage. And it's published by Servant, and it's a beautiful, beautiful book with wonderful pictures. And of course, Father Mitch, you and the Holy Land are intrinsically tied, certainly through the rosary.
Yeah.
You know, you have that book on Mary and the rosary, and you had your confrere back in the 70s who got you to pray the rosary again. Right. You're out there in the Holy Land. And was the Holy Land the first time you went there? Was it 81? Is that 82. What I remember? 82. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I was, there was a nun who was organizing a group, and she asked me to be the chaplain. And I remember thinking, oh, this will be the only time I ever get to see this. I was in graduate school.
That's with Sister Maria Ava Marino?
Right.
Okay, right, okay.
And she, you know, got this organized. And so I went, and it was a great trip. Mm-hmm. We went to Jordan, Israel, and Egypt. You could go. You can go back and forth, but you could go once through. So that's what we did. And you know, it's been amazing to watch how the Holy Land is developed. Sometimes for good, a lot of times for good, a lot of times for bad.
And that's outside of the politics? I mean, just...
No.
What do you mean? Or is it...
It's hard to extract the politics.
No, I didn't know if it had to do with the way the holy sites are done or the pilgrimages are done
and many
or what's there.
Yeah, and many of the holy sites are really, you know, especially spurred by the year 2000 Jubilee, you know, and the Pope's visit. I mean, a lot of these places just beautified. Also, there's been a lot of improvement in the economy. The country is better off. When I went to Jordan back in 1982, there were still a lot, I mean, really a lot of Bedouins living in tents. Now, you know, I haven't been there in about 10 years, but you know, the change is tremendous in terms of the people now living in houses and with running water and pavement and things like all sorts of other amenities. So there's been a lot of improvement there. The political situation has certainly gone up and down. Some things are pretty good, some things are not. And the number of Christians in the country has definitely gone down.
See that throughout the Middle East.
Oh yeah. In Israel, neither the Israeli nor the Muslim community really cares about the Christians staying. They really had served a great, you know, grounding in the history of these shrines. These were their parish churches, but also they were a good moderating influence. It's a real loss. You know, back in the 20s, Christians used to be 20% of the population. Now it's less than 1%. So that's been a loss, and that's not so good. So,
now this is a beautiful book. Now, did Servant come to you about this? I mean, you got beautiful pictures, beautiful illustrations in here, and said, "Hey, so many people have been to the Holy Land with you." I'm assuming watching EWTN, seeing, you know, let alone the ones who are lucky enough to go with the trips that you make. And it
was also for a lot of people who never will have that opportunity.
Right.
You know, they can't travel, they may not be able to afford it. And so this is a way to not just have pictures. We have pictures here. Some of the pilgrims have, you know, taken these photographs.
John King and Mac Royo.
And as a matter of fact, John, I'm his confirmation sponsor, and you know, so
is he a convert or?
Oh no,
no, just he's young enough for you to be.
Yeah.
Well, you're old enough to be his confirmation.
Yes,
I guess that would
that's
true
sure.
too.
And you know, and so he came with. I promised him that I would take him on one of the trips, and he did photography for this book. So I did a very good job.
These maps are beautiful.
They are.
They've got, especially the map, the way they use that map to kind of Jerusalem and to highlight it as you go through the different sections.
And you know, there's he's passed away now, but was a wonderful Benedictine priest from Germany. He'd been in the Wehrmacht in World War II, and toward the end, he just refused to start executing Jews and things like that. He said, I'm not going to be part of that. He hadn't done that before. He wouldn't work in the camp.
Right.
But then as they're coming to an end, he was being told to start executing prisoners.
They were trying to get rid of all the evidence.
Right. And he said no, which risked him being killed. But he wouldn't just murder people. And they didn't kill him. And he joined the Benedictines and came to the Holy Land and lived most of his life as a monk there. And he wrote some wonderful books. One of them is called The Fifth Gospel.
Oh, right. You mentioned that in here. Right.
And he meant by that the country itself is so important for understanding the gospel. Jesus didn't live in a mythological world.
Never land like you talk about.
Yeah, right. Yeah. This isn't myth. This is a real place. And the real customs and habits and rhythms of life. I've been in the Holy Land in the various seasons of the year, and and have a better understanding of just the normal rhythms of the celebrations of Passover and Pentecost and other feasts in the Jewish community, the rhythms of the land's produce and the weather, and the rhythms of people's everyday life and what they eat and such, and their customs. And in many ways, most of the Israelis don't come from the Middle East. They were immigrants from Europe and America and other places. Sure. Their grandparents came or they came. But they still bring this sense of Judaism. While the Palestinian community, whether Christian or Muslim, have been in the land for centuries, and they communicate a sense of that rhythm that's just in the land. And it's very important to know both communities and not say, I'm only going to study the Jews or only study the Arabs. No, you learn from both because the land forms them and their faith forms them. Certainly they're Christians.
One of the things that you mentioned, on our third trip in 1991, this is when you went with Sister Mary Ava, the tour company defrauded the group by not providing hotels, meals, vehicle, and you were pressed into service to be a guide, and then you ultimately ended up working with another company, Consolidated Tours.
Right. Yeah, which is a Palestinian Christian company recommended to me by the government of Israel.
Right. And then say you'd go on subsequent pilgrimages. I would frequently supplement the guide's explanation and even take over the presentation at the site. No, that can't be possible.
I know that's so out of character.
How you and you're shy. You actually would be. They really must have pushed you to interject some of your information into this side, and then you start speaking Arabic and then Hebrew, and then the next thing you know, it says here, I obtained permission to guide my own groups. What do you mean permission? From the tour group, or who gives people permission?
There was a dispute some years ago, a policy set in the days of Moshe Dayan. Remember, he was the great general of
with the eye patch.
Eye patch, who really coordinated the successful 1967 war.
Right, yeah.
And for Israel, successful. And he said we have more to fear from 50 Arab guides than from 50 Arab jets.
Really? Okay.
Because they were afraid that they would give the other side of the story.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm sure that this doesn't happen in your house, but most of the time when a husband and a wife have a dispute, there are two sides to the story.
Right.
I always like to listen to both before I come with a decision on something. So similarly there, these people have been living in the country for the last 100-some years now. And so there's two sides. And they weren't giving Christian Arabs licenses to guide. So the patriarchs, the Greek, Armenian, and Latin patriarchs of Jerusalem, all forced the Israeli government to say, we're going to give a license to the priests. So that's how I got mine.
Okay.
We had to go to the Holy Land 7 times with guides, trained guides, and present some of our credentials and permission from our superiors in the States, and then we got permission to be guides. So that's how I did that.
Now you say, my primary goal in this book is to share the biblical texts associated with the key pilgrimage sites throughout the land, so as to help you deepen your prayer through augmenting, quote unquote, composition of place. That is an imaginative sense. This book therefore includes pictures, and of course that kind of comes from your Ignatian spirituality as well, right? That you talk about in the book.
Right. You know, St. Ignatius of Loyola had gone to the Holy Land at a fairly early stage in his conversion. And he wanted to get a sense of what the Holy Land is like, to give it an impression to his own imagination, and that augmented his prayer. And in fact, he wanted to go back after he started the Jesuits, wanted all the Jesuits to go over there, and they couldn't because of a war. But I have found this very helpful. As a matter of fact, that was exactly why I wanted to do the Holy Land Rosary, to give people a picture. You know, for instance, when we do the one on the presentation, the stairway built by King Herod the Great is still there. You can walk up those stairs. They've been buried under the surface for centuries, but they're still there. And this ancient mikvah is there, and I show that and all. And so you get a sense, a feel for the antiquity of these places. And you know, that helps a person to get an imaginative sense of what's happening in the gospel. And to reflect on it. And that's one of the reasons I became a guide. I didn't want to just say, all right, you know, the archaeologists say this is this. I'll give some of that information. But my goal is to draw people to meditate on the scriptures.
Yeah, prayer is a big part of this book for you, isn't
Exactly. What I had done, I lived in Jerusalem in the summer of '94. For about 4 months I lived there. And while I was there, I went to a lot of the places and spent a weekend or a couple days at the shrines. The Franciscan houses frequently have guest rooms. And I would just stay for a couple nights on Mount Tabor or at the Church of the Visitation and so on, and meditate on the place. I would go to the sepulcher and go on the Stations of the Cross and so on, and just take time to meditate. And in that, I then would take those scriptures, and then I composed a prayer book for the people who go to the Holy Land with me, in which I translated the scripture texts myself, and then organized them antiphonally so that half the group will say, take the words of Jesus, half will take the words of the Pharisees. Or the leader will take the words of Jesus, half will be Pharisees, half will be apostles, and so on. But so that people read the text at the place. And that anchors it. Well, from that book came this one. You know, that was the next text. Because for that book wouldn't be as useful for people who haven't been there. But with this, I can give some reflections.
You would kind of marry it all together.
Exactly. Pull my reflections, the biblical text and the pictures.
And the prayer. Yeah, it's all there. Now, you say that you structured this book geographically rather than chronologically. Why?
Right. Because, you know, you may want to do the mysteries of the Rosary in order, but you have to go to Nazareth, and then down to Ankerem, then over to Bethlehem, and then to Jerusalem. You know, some of them you can do more easily in order, but it's not the way it is geographically. So I did it so that as somebody is walking through Jerusalem, here's the way that you walk and what you see along the way. You know, here's the Via Dolorosa, here's the Holy Sepulchre, and so on. With here's the temple area. So that people get a flavor for the land, and you know, for instance, you know, it's just geographically the fact that on the Mount of Olives, Jesus ascended at the top, and a number of the people who come with me are coming in their golden years after they've worked hard, raised their families. They have enough money that maybe they can take a trip. That means I start from the ascension and walk my way down the hill.
Okay.
Rather than walking
up the hill.
The Mount of Olives is steep. You know, sometimes you see Israeli soldiers, you know, running up and down because the running up really strengthens their legs. For a lot of people, it'd be too steep. Right. So we go down and just follow that path, so that then you have a sense. This is what it's like being in the Holy Land. You know, this is how, you know, things happen where they happen, not in the order you pick, but the way Jesus lived. And so that's how we do it that way.
Now, you start right at the beginning of chapter 1, the shepherd's field, and you talk about the cave chapel and all these outdoor chapels, and you say a favorite element within this chapel is the 3 frescoes depicting the story of the gospel we celebrate here. I like to focus on one character appearing all 3, the shepherd's dog.
Yes.
Why?
First of all, I love dogs.
Okay.
We always had dogs growing up. I don't have them now. I can't keep a dog now. It's not fair to the dog. But it is also.
Of course, you could use a retriever maybe. You know, when you're out there hunting, maybe help bring the prey back.
Maybe,
but kind of big prey you have.
Yeah. But the dogs here, the shepherd's dog, is an interesting character because when the angels appear, the first fresco shows the angels appearing to the shepherds. The shepherds are in awe, while the dog, being a good watchdog, is barking his head off and just mean looking. Because what are these people doing here? And it's sort of the state of soul of a lot of people. You know, that they're not ready for God, and they're barking away. Recently came one of my friends, Tim Brown, was talking to an atheist at the gym who was like that barking dog. He was just real mean. Oh, you're ignorant, all that. He was real mean to him. And then they go to the crib, and that's you see the second. They're in the cave in Bethlehem, and the shepherds are in adoration, and the dog is just focused. You know, just intently looking at baby Jesus. And that's where we see that we have to take this next step of intently meditating on the person of Jesus. And then the third one, the shepherds are coming back and they're dancing and playing instruments, and the dog is also barking in a happy way, and he's also leaping around like dogs do, and barking in a happily way to show the joy that Christ has brought in his life. So that's why I like to see him.
Okay. In chapter 2, the Church of the Nativity, I thought this was interesting. You say the Church of the Nativity is the oldest church in the Holy Land. The Persians destroyed all the other churches when they invaded in 613 AD. The reason they did not destroy this church was that it contained a mosaic of the Magi who were wearing Persian-style clothes.
Exactly. Oh. And they said, "Oh, homeboys."
So there must be something here we're missing, so we'll leave this alone.
Yeah. So when they saw that, they said, "Okay." They let that church, but they destroyed every other church in the country. And one of the reasons was they had promised Jews from Persia, "We will rebuild the temple for you if you help us." And so this began another persecution. There are caves where thousands of Christians were just blocked up. And they discovered the caves with all these Christians inside who were killed. And you know, the Persians and the Jewish community pointed them out and put them in and killed them. You know, so you know, this is a human problem. You know, people talk about the terrible things that the Crusaders did to the Jews. Partly they were doing it in revenge. You know, and both sides were wrong. You know, you don't do that to people. We see enough of that. That's terrible enough.
Right. And the other thing you say in the Cave of the Nativity, those unfamiliar, though unfamiliar to Westerners, stone mangers were commonly used in stables to feed animals.
Oh, yeah.
Many can still be seen in the ruins of the royal stables of Megiddo.
Right.
Now the manger itself,
which is ancient Armageddon.
Right. I was going to say, isn't that where
the end times.
Okay. So that's the thing. I mean, was it? And I guess that's the question in going through here. How confident are you that the locations you're looking at are actually the real locations? How much certainty is there, or does it depend on the place you go to?
It depends on each place. I'll give an example. The synagogue in Capernaum, 100% not an ounce of doubt. You can see that the foundation of the synagogue is a first century basalt foundation. Now, there is a late 4th century synagogue made of limestone built over that foundation, but the foundation of the original synagogue 100% is from the time of Christ. So there's no doubt. Peter's house, I put that in the 95 plus percentile of being in the right place. A is by the sea. They even found 2 fishing hooks under some of the stones, first century fishing hooks. And Peter's name is scratched into the stones as 1st and 2nd century level. So you say, this is pretty good. With the cave of Bethlehem, the Romans, the Emperor Hadrian, had come to make Jerusalem a Roman city. That instigated a Jewish revolt, the Bar Kokhba revolt. And he just killed a lot of Jews. It was horrible for the Jews. But he also wanted to stop the Christians. So he built temples over Calvary and the tomb of Jesus, which are very close to each other. And he built a temple over the cave of the Nativity.
So he was demonstrating where, at least at that time, the Christians thought those things were.
Exactly.
Okay, he was identifying them that way.
Right, and trying to block them from coming on pilgrimage, because there's a 1st century graffito that is at the Holy Sepulchre saying, "Lord, we have come." Now, that's really early. Also at the house of Our Lady in Nazareth, we show this in the Holy Rosary and the Holy Land videos, there are engraved in stone graffiti saying, "This is a holy place, the house of Mary," and so on. So, and that's 2nd century and 3rd century. So you've got these ancient things. And when Queen Helena came to the Holy Land, she asked the local Christians, "Where is Calvary? Where is the tomb? Where is Bethlehem, the place of Jesus' birth?" And they said, "It's under those temples." So she, being the emperor's mother, was able to knock down those temples. And sure enough, Calvary was found, a place where the crosses were found. It's down underneath. It was a sort of a garbage pit. And there were 3 crosses found in there. And the tomb was found. And then in Bethlehem, the cave was found with 2 mangers in it. So, and one manger was taken to Rome, and the other manger remained there. Nobody could say, this is the one Jesus was in. We don't know for sure. Because there's just 2 mangers there. But that they had this there. Also at the Shepherd's Field, there's a 1st century baptistry. 1st century. As well as monasteries from the 4th, 5th, and 6th, right at the end of the persecutions, until the Persians destroyed them all. And so you see this kind of evidence. You say, okay, this makes perfect sense.
Well, one of the things I know is there 3 different places who claim to be Emmaus?
Yes. One of the differences is because manuscripts of Luke's gospel indicate one distance, and then others say another. So there's a discrepancy. The Crusaders and some of the Byzantines had built a church at the more distant Emmaus, which is getting close to the airport now, the modern airport. It's not that far away.
They wanted to build it close to the airport, I guess. That's what it was.
No!
No, okay.
But I'm just using the location.
I understand.
When you're going on the road to Jerusalem from the airport, it's right off one of the exits. But the other 2 are closer. And my own sense is that the one at the village called Emmaus still has a Roman road. The remains of a Roman road right next to it. That's the one I think is more authentic.
I think it is. I want to thank you for this book. I mean, obviously, besides having the great pleasure of knowing you and talking to you on and off the record, so to speak, and seeing you on television, and obviously the rosary, which is very, very popular. All we have to do is take it off, and people call us up and complain about not being able to spend that time in the Holy Land. But this definitely succeeds as an armchair pilgrimage. Thank you. The Master Pilgrimage Director himself. Thank you so much. The one and only Father Mitch Pacwa. The Holy Land, an armchair pilgrimage. Great insights, beautiful pictures, published by Servant Books, available through the EWTN Religious Catalog. Check it out. Check us out next time right here on Bookmark. Thanks.